Are you, well, I guess, are you thinking about seed stage still?
Yeah.
I think when you're not yet funded by any sort of institutional capital, I mean, any kind of validation is going to be important for you, right? So any kind of commitments you can get are fantastic, but the whole thing is going to either happen or not based on who's going to take the lead. So I always have to be on the prize there in terms of finding that lead investor and finding somebody you really believe in. Now, if you're even better, you've got a couple of term sheets to go look at, but you take it how it comes.
Is there anything special or specific to 500 startups that you can point out that is different from the other investors that are invested in Matic?
I guess I think there's a bunch of things that are different about 500 startups, but in particular, I think to your point, we do have with some of our investors, relationships where we talk quite a bit with them and that sort of thing, and 500 startups is sort of there for you when you need them, and also out of your way when you don't. Anytime our door's open, guys, but most of the time we got our heads down and are racing a million miles an hour. So I think they've got a good touch with that, and that's a big thing.
Okay, so if there are no questions, I'm going to move on to a little bit more light on fund number 2. If Vishal and Kali can share. So there's been an official announcement already, and the press release that we see. It kind of remains a seed fund, same portfolio strategy, going for volume and doubling down when one of the deals work. So what's new actually? Is there anything that startup founders or the ecosystem can expect out of fund number 2? Are you guys looking at new verticals or yeah?
I think our investment thesis remains pretty much the same. So we're still going to be doing seed deals. What we're looking at doing is about 200 companies over the next couple of years. We say 3, but knowing our pace, it's more likely going to be 2. One of the things that we're looking at more intently as well are verticals in more traditional spaces. For example, we've been looking at some food companies. We've been looking at companies that would otherwise fall into a category of small businesses as opposed to high-tech startups, but not just to get a sense of what different businesses are out there and what are the other investment opportunities. Fund 1, the way we like to see the first fund, was that it was an opportunity for us to explore the thesis of investing on a portfolio theory in Southeast Asia and seeing if that plays out, and seeing if there was enough follow-on capital in the ecosystem, seeing whether we could support the companies that we were investing in. Fund 2 is really about nailing that down. So what we're trying to do is build up the services and support that we can offer our portfolio companies as well as investing at the seed stage into these companies. And I'll touch on a couple of examples to explain what I mean by that. The first is we're planning on scaling the service that we offer our companies called Distro Dojo, or Distribution and Growth Hacking. We've done this successfully in Kuala Lumpur so far. Justina, my colleague who's at the back over there, and Emilian, who's joined us as well, they are responsible for running this project in Kuala Lumpur. 500 Startups globally has historically a great tradition in growth hacking and distribution and content marketing and things that help startups optimize conversion and spend money. And so we feel that it is a skill set that's lacking right now in Southeast Asia. Not enough companies have proficiency in those areas, and scaling a service like that for our portfolio companies across the region is something that would be immediately helpful. So we're thinking about doing that. We are doing that actually in the rest of Southeast Asia.
How many companies have you ran in Early Dojo? I think it's 20 over companies.
I think it's 20. Justina?
How many companies have we done for the Early Dojo, the history of Dojo in Malaysia? 20, right? 20 companies.
So 20 companies so far. We're planning on doing a lot more. Traditionally, those programs were 2 months long. We're planning on doing shorter programs that are just about maybe 2 weeks long, that happen across the course of the year in various geographies in Southeast Asia, including Singapore. The second thing that we're doing is that we're expanding the ability of our portfolio support team to help our companies. Right now, it's led by a one-woman army called Becky, who's at the back as well. And dealing with 119 portfolio companies is no easy task. Consistent requests from our companies, we need to help them with follow-on fundraising. So systematizing those processes, hiring more capable people to help us look after our portfolio companies, especially when it comes to follow-on rounds of fundraising, is something that we want to focus on, because we have very, very good relationships with follow-on investors, not just in Southeast Asia, but really across the world. And what we've been doing recently is really getting a lot more attention from Silicon Valley-based investors in Southeast Asia. So we've been actively taking Valley-based investors on tours of the region, helping make introductions to our portfolio companies so that they can try and understand the ecosystem. They're not really too keen in investing in China right now. India seems a little too frothy. So Southeast Asia seems to be the next market that they've got their eyes on, but there's no good entry point for people who haven't invested in the region yet. So we're providing those firms with a soft landing and introducing them to portfolio companies who may be at a good stage for them to get their feet wet. Besides that, I mean, that's the way that we're thinking about how we're scaling our services in Southeast Asia. So we're really looking forward to getting the ball rolling. We're really looking forward to start investing from the fund. We've already made a number of commitments to portfolio companies, and hopefully we can support those companies as well through their life cycle.
And I think to touch on what's different from what Fund 1 and Fund 2 to what Vishal is saying is that we've experimented with a few things in Fund 1. We just need to do more of it in Fund 2. And also, to be very specific as well, like a lot of companies, they need very different things. Some companies need a bunch of stuff that we cannot help them with, right? That they have to help themselves if they work with other people to help them. So but most of the startups, they either need to spend money to grow, which that's where the Distro Dojo services come in, or they need to recruit people. And this, we're running some experiments right now with Jung, which also brought into the room here to attend this as well, like to experiment how we can assist our startup hiring at scale. So we don't really make much announcements on that yet because we haven't found product market fit, right, in terms of how do we do that reliably and rapidly. And so we're trying to figure it out as we go along. So that's what's kind of exciting, I think, about the startup industry as well, is a lot of us are very new at our jobs. You know, like Vishal and I collectively, we've only been investing professionally over more than 2 to 3 years, right? And so we're trying to learn how to do things better, and then we get a lot of feedback from our founders, and then we try to just improve on what we learn from, you know, and hopefully as an ecosystem, all of us can learn to do our own jobs better as well.
So is that kind of a drawback, you know, for investing in such a high volume of companies whereby you have to cater, you know, to all of them with all these value-added services, you know, and how do you actually manage 120 portfolio companies with such a lean team, right?
I think it's about it. It's hard, but it's not impossible, and it's about thinking how to do it in a systemic way and at scale. It's also about setting expectations right from the get-go with the companies that we invest in about what services we can offer and what value we can add. So we try and think about it in a number of ways. First, at the time in which we invest in companies, we make sure that the founders are aware of what exactly we can and cannot do. We tell them that we do not sit on board seats because otherwise we would spend our lives sitting on board seats.
And we have to compete with other investors who want board seats. Most investors want board seats. Yeah.
So we don't take board seats, we have WhatsApp board seats where you can just ping us on WhatsApp and ask us any questions you want and we respond, right? I mean, that's a fair fair example of how we work, and that's how we do it at scale. The second is we usually co-invest with other investors. We rarely go into companies alone. We actually don't like doing that because we don't need rounds. There are some instances in which we do when, as Kylie said, we feel bullish about companies, but we try to cobble together rounds in which we get investors with different proficiencies and who are on a spectrum more active or less active in the growth of a company, on the operations of a company. So we'll be one investor, there'll be another investor who's a lot more active than we are. There's another investor who adds a particular type of value that we may not be able to add to a company. So we cobble those rounds together so we can help companies out that way. The third way we do things is, and we often do this, we actually go through a process whereby we tear down everything that we can offer to its simplest form. And we ask ourselves this question: when we invest in a company, what do those founders need? What are the immediate things that a company that has received seed stage funding need from an investor like us? They usually are just a few very simple things. The first is they want to understand, even at the time that they just raised a seed round, what their KPIs should be for their next round of fundraising. And we help them set that. Who are the investors they need to be speaking with next, and whether we can make those introductions. That's what they need to do next. Whether we can open our large database of contacts and connections, whether they're in government, whether they're in property, whether they're other startups, whether they're with big tech companies, to them, and whether we can do that quickly. Whether we can help them understand how they can spend their money on growth, which is where distribution and growth hacking comes. whether we can help them with recruiting so the founders have less on their mind and can focus on growing the company, and whether we can help them with regional expansion, because some of the startups that we invest in use the money that we invest in, that they get in the rounds in which we invest, to grow regionally as well. And having bases of people in different companies helps. So all of these things, really it's about putting systems in place that allow you to do it at scale. Yes, it means that we're going to have to get some more people in to help us run this, but it's also about setting expectations about what we can do. And the truth is, as the company progresses, our job is to hand the baton on to investors who will come down the line and add more and greater value to the company than we can. And that's when they take over. So our most successful companies are ones who proceeded on with follow-on funding to larger investors who are able to take them to their next stage of growth. We are less helpful to those companies, and that allows us to focus on the earlier stage companies and moving them along the line. So it's kind of like, like this conveyor belt where we move our early stage companies to the next round of financing, then focus on the next batch and move them to the next round of financing, and we go through that system again and again and again. And the best founders are founders who know exactly how to use us. Like, they know what value we add, and they will ask us, we need this introduction, we need these connections, we need KPIs for next growth, we understand that there are these investors who are investing in our space, please make the introductions. And it may appear that that's annoying, but that's extremely helpful for us because we can direct our energies and attention to getting them exactly what they need.
I think a kind of very simple way to look at it is that you're not going to get anywhere in life trying to be everything to anyone and everyone all the time, right? I think that's a pretty useful strategy for overstretching yourself and under-delivering consistently. I think that what we're trying to do at 500 Startups as an organization globally is we're going to invest in hundreds and thousands of companies all over the world.